Well, good evening. Today, I'm actually going to build something. I know, shocking, but you heard it here first. I am going to build a kit from start to finish. Well, not just today, obviously. It might take me several days and a couple of videos to get it done, but nonetheless, that's the intention. And the kit that I'm going to be building is this one. Isn't it beautiful? With those lines, those colors, the happy smiling pilot. The... Oh, silly me. Honestly, I don't know. This is what I'm going to be building. Isn't it beautiful? Those lines, those colors, the happy smiling pilot. All right, I'm just messing with you. To think I passed up a promising career as a graphic artist. I don't know. Wasted talent, I tells you. Anyway, this is what I'm going to be building. This baby's been on my to-do list for far, far too long. It's a beautiful kit, needs to be built. It's from one of my favorite eras, the Between the Wars years. And it's a biplane. I love biplanes. It's one of those colorful US Army things, and who doesn't love those, eh? I mean, what's not to like? It's colorful. So you gotta like it, right? Anyway, so this is what we're going to be building. I'll give you a quick overview of what's in the box. I know I said I wouldn't do box opening videos, and I hold to that. I'm not going to rush out and buy the latest Hasegawa kit and crack open the lid just to show you what's in the box, because that's just a bit juvenile, but I don't think it's unreasonable to show you what I'm starting out with if I'm actually building something. So give you a quick look at the kit, the few bits and pieces that I have to go with it, some of my reference material, and then we'll crack on into building it. It's exciting, isn't it? I'm excited. Yeah, a little bit. There are 4 kits in total in this range of 1/32nd scale 1930s aircraft from Hasegawa, 2 US Navy, and 2 US Army. So in addition to the P-12E, we have the Curtiss BF-2C1, the P-12's naval sibling, the Boeing F-4B-4, and this and the Curtiss are obviously later releases, and we have the Boeing P-26 Pea Shooter. Now, it's a shame that Hasegawa didn't continue this series of kits. I personally would have loved to have seen a P-6E Hawk or even some RAF Between the Wars fighters. That would have been pretty awesome. And still would be. Hasegawa, please, come on. Nonetheless, I'm very happy to have these 4 at least. It's not something that a lot of manufacturers would take a chance on, at least mainstream manufacturers. So, good to have them. Now, 3 out of 4 of them were released in 1971, the exception being the B-26, which was released in 1974. And as you can see, these earlier releases had some absolutely stunning box art. Really, really nice. Suitable for framing. In fact, I just might do that sometime. Now, so there we go. Those are the 4 kits. Let's see what the P-12E has in store for us, shall we? Here we go. What do we got? Well, we got a plastic bag with 2 sprues, one in olive drab and one in yellow, like a giant matchbox kit. Hermetically sealed in plastic for your protection, or at least they were until I opened it. Then we've got a sheet of mediocre decals, which I probably won't use, and a small instruction leaflet, which I probably will use now and then, occasionally. Oh, and there's a tiny sprue for the clear windshield. And that's what you get. All of these kits are really, really nice. Nice cockpit detail, pretty decent engines, nice surface detail. Sure, they've got raised panel lines, but hey, not a big deal. We can get around that if we need to do. Now, as you can imagine, aftermarket parts aren't exactly thick on the ground for these kits, but I do have a few things here. So, number 1, a lovely resin engine from Vector. The engines in the P-12 and the F-4B-4 are okay. They're not great. They're okay. And the reason I say that is, let me just show you why. They are molded as one solid lump of plastic. That is, the faceplate and push rods are all molded in one piece. The P26, being a later kit, has a much nicer engine. It's got separate cylinders, separate push rods, and a separate faceplate. So right out of the box, that one's very, very nice. These ones, sure, they'd look good with some careful painting, but I don't know. I think solid molded push rods like this in 32nd scale doesn't really cut it. Thus, the lovely resin engine from Vector, which has all separate parts and is an absolutely superb casting. Also suitable for the F4B4, and there's no reason you couldn't use this in the P26 if you wanted to, because it was all the same engine. So we got that. I've also got, over here, some microscale decals, which will replace the fairly awful kit decals. I'm using them. And I've got a set of 1930s seatbelts from Model Technologies. Remember these guys? Whatever happened to them? One of the earliest producers of photo etch parts. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the first producer was Photocut, but these guys followed soon after. In fact, the copyright date on this is 1988. So, been around for a good long time. Don't know what happened to them, but you can still occasionally find these on online auctions and these. And they're pretty nice, well worth using. So that's what I've got for aftermarket bits. The rest is all going to have to be scratch built or just used as is from the kit. And the kits are very nice, so not a problem. Now, for reference material, I have the December 1964 issue of Aero Modeler. Now, this is aimed at RC modelers back in its infancy, back when they were using tubes and valves and things. But nonetheless, there is a very short but very good article on the F4B4 and P12E series here, and some very nice 1/48 scale plans that accompany that article. And this is one of the few, if not the only place that I've seen that correctly shows the differences between the F4B4 and the P12. Many people assume that the F4B4 was just a navalized version of the P12E, but not really the case. In a lot of respects, they were very different aircraft. One of the big differences was this bulkhead behind the cockpit is at much more of an acute angle in the P12E than it is in the F4B4. In the latter, it's nearly vertical, whereas here it's sloped forward quite a bit. I'm really not sure of the reasoning for that. Perhaps it had something to do with the F4B4 needing a stronger fuselage because it was banging down on carrier decks frequently, but who knows? Nonetheless, it's the only place I've seen that, and it is quite correct. Hasegawa didn't get that quite right on their F4B4 or P12E, but pretty close. Not a deal breaker by any means. So, what else have I got here? I've got the P12 F4B4 in action book. There's some decent cockpit photos in there, which we can use. I've got my official monogram U.S. Army Air Corps color guide. And this has some paint chips in here, which will be fairly useful. And finally, I have Dana Bell's Air Force Colors Volume 1. And Dana Bell is an authority on this kind of thing, so I kind of trust him for what he's saying in here. Very useful. Other than that, I've got a few pictures that I've gleaned off the internet, and that's about it. So that's what I'm starting out with. So I've made a nice little space on my workbench. It's time to dive into the build. It's exciting, isn't it? I'm excited. Did I say that? I think I did. Hasegawa did make one fairly major compromise in the two Boeing biplane fighters they made in this range, and that is they've used the same wing sprue for both kits. You can kind of understand why, given the high cost of tooling up a model kit and the fact that the wing is mostly the same in both aircraft. There are, however, a couple of differences. Number one being navigation lights. The F4B4 had them on the top of the wing, slightly inboard of the tip, whereas the P12 had them right out at the end of the tip. Hasegawa has given you both options on the same wing, which is kind of interesting. And there's no mention of that in the instruction, so it's up to us to check our references and make sure we're picking the right ones. However, not a problem. I'll just shave off the F4B4 one and use the P12 version on the end there. In fact, I'll probably just shave them both off and make better navigation lights from clear stock. The other issue, and this is going to be a bit more problematic to fix, is there are two metal panels underneath the top wing. These cover the flotation gear in the F4B4, which would deploy should the aircraft go in the drink, and it would keep it afloat until it could be salvaged. Not applicable to the P12, so somehow I'm going to have to remove them, which should be a great deal of fun given the fabric texture under here. One other minor difference, I can find it here, bottom of the lower wings, the lower wings, Hasegawa has very faintly molded the outlines of the handholds. Again, only applicable to the F4B4 for the crew, ground crew, if you will, deck crew, to handle the aircraft while it's taxiing on the deck. Again, not applicable to the P12, but they are very faint, so that'll be very easy to just sand them off. One other thing that they've missed here, somewhere, there's a little panel right here that actually should have a magnetic compass inset in there, but not a problem to add that. However, not going to worry about the wings just now. Let's concentrate on le fuselage, shall we? Now, for the most part, I think the surface textures on here are really, really nice. As I mentioned, raised panel lines, but hey-ho, not a big deal. I'm going to rescribe the ones in the forward panels here and over the wing roots. That one shouldn't be a lot of fun, but fortunately, there aren't a lot to rescribe on here. Raised panel line across here, I don't think that's technically incorrect. The P12 and the F4B and P26 were made with overlapping aluminum panels in that section. So technically, I don't really think a raised panel line is incorrect there. And it is very, very fine. So I'm going to keep that. The other thing is, these aircraft were literally festooned with hundreds of pesky little rivets all over the back end. I think Hasegawa has done a really good job on these. They're quite fine and probably as close to scale as we're going to get. So I'm going to keep those too. Now, the other thing is, the angled bulkhead behind the cockpit that I mentioned, Hasegawa has done at far too great of an angle here with a line of rivets and a very fine panel line. It should start just slightly forward of the end of the wing root and carry up to the bottom of the headrest, making it not quite as angled as we have it here. So somehow I'm going to have to remove that and rescribe it because it is quite visible in photographs. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Now, I have to say, there is one task in modeling that I absolutely loathe, and it's rescribing. I can't stand it. I have so many projects that ended up going back in the box because I screwed up the scribing and got frustrated and, get away from me. My light just went out. What the hell? Oh, he tells you. Well, let me just quickly finish this by saying I hate rescribing. Doesn't matter what kind of scriber I use, how lightly I go, how patient I am. The damn thing will always go skittering across my plastic and put a nice jagged line where I didn't want one. So this isn't going to be fun. I'm not going to show you my painful rescribing process because there are plenty of videos on YouTube that are far better at it than I am. So go and have a look at those. But I'm going to take care of this first. Get it out of the way. And I'm going to fix this light. I just got this light. It's already burnt out. The hell? Does nothing last anymore? Planned obsolescence. I tells you. Damn corporations. Well, that wasn't quite as onerous as I thought. Still not a lot of fun, though. Not for me, anyway. I don't like it. Nope. No, sir. But there we are. I've rescribed the lines and, reinstated the fasteners using a piece of sharpened hypodermic tubing and eradicated the incorrect bulkhead behind the cockpit. And to do that, I used, where the hell is it? There it is. Yeah. I used a piece of bamboo skewer and I just cut the ends off at an angle and glued bits of sandpaper on the end, 400 grit on one end, 1000 grit on the other. And that enabled me to get in between the rivets and sand out the incorrect lines without destroying said rivets. So that's it. That's about as much scribing as I want to do, at least for the moment. There's a little bit more over the top here. I can't really do that until I get the fuselage together. But now we can go into my favorite part, detailing the cockpit. So what Hasegawa gives you isn't too bad, kind of. It's sort of okay-ish. The framework's not too bad. It could use a little embellishing, I think, really. What really sucks, kind of, is a lot of the stuff that they've molded in between the framework. Like they've basically molded a semi-relief throttle in there, which looks kind of crap. And I think they're, where are they? Flares there, but they look more like German hand grenades. I don't know. That's all going to have to go. So I'm going to try and keep the framework, just embellish that a little bit, and get rid of the rest and scratch build that. And we'll see how that goes. But we're going to get on to that right now. Well, despite my best efforts, it proved to be too much of a pain in the ass keeping the framing and removing everything in between it. So I just took a Dremel with a cutting bit and took the whole darn thing out, with the exception of the bits in the front here. I may or may not keep them, I'm not sure. The gray areas are where I gouged it a little bit with the Dremel, and that's Mr. Surfacer filling the gouges up. And I finished it off with wet dry sandpaper, used wet, as I always do. And then I started on the framing. As you can see, the top piece in here, and I don't know if you can see, but I actually managed to get all the lightning holes in there. That may not be visible, possibly. But yeah, if you're interested in how I actually managed to drill all those holes in there, there will be a video on the members only page. So please do consider being a member, because there's lots of extra videos and tidbits and benefits on there. So you can have a look at how I did that. But yeah, so I started on the framing, and I realized that oops, I don't have very much plastic strip left. In fact, I've only got a piece of 20 thou by 10 thou and a piece of 30 thou by 40 thou, and that just ain't going to cut it to finish the cockpit. So at some point, I will have to take a trip to the big city of Saskatoon, which is about 55 miles from here, and purchase some more plastic strip from the hobby shop there. I could cut my own from plastic sheet, but I'm lazy and I don't want to do that. So what I am going to do is temporarily shift focus. I'm going to work on other aspects of the cockpit, like the floor, and I'm going to make a new seat, because probably the worst part of Hasegawa's kit is this horrible seat. It's, yeah, pretty darn thick. I think if you scaled that up, it'd be about 4 inches thick, and probably way more than the pilot would. And it's completely the wrong style. From what I can tell from photos, the F4B4 and P12 had the same type of seat that the P26 did, and that is, it's only got a seat pan, and the rear bulkhead actually forms the seat back. It just had a cushion attached to it. It's hard to tell. It's really difficult to find good photographs of that area, but from what I can glean from pictures, that's what it looks like, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to work on that. I'm also going to scratch build a new instrument panel, because Hasegawa's is okay, but the instrument layout is wrong, and it had quite a thick padding around it, which is not represented at all on here. So I'm going to scratch build a new one and a new mount, because the mount is kind of clunky. So I can do that in the meantime, because it might be a few days before I can get to the city and get some more plastic strip. And I'm also going to build that lovely Vector engine. Stay tuned. This is what we get with that superb resin engine from Vector, along with a small and simple sheet of instructions, which does mention we need to cut a little bit off the front of the fuselage in order to fit, presumably, this piece here, which you don't get in Hasegawa's kit. And this is just an amazing casting. It really is lovely. Right down to, let's see if I can zoom in a bit and show you that. There are 2 bolts across the end of each exhaust pipe. Not sure what their purpose is, maybe some sort of strengthening thingy. But Vector has even got those in there. So just an amazing casting. And if we compare this to, I'll just zoom back out a bit here, compare that to Hasegawa's engine, you can see the resin one is very much superior. Let's get that in frame a bit. But let's not be too unkind to Hasegawa. Don't forget, the P12 is a 53-year-old kit, so I'm sure it was state-of-the-art in 1971, but the times, they have changed. Things have moved on a bit, and this resin engine is definitely the way to go. So, I've washed all the parts in warm soapy water and scrubbed them with a toothbrush, and hopefully that will be sufficient to remove the molding release agent, if there is any. And so I'm going to start by priming them. I know I said I don't usually prime, but I do think it's essential for resin parts because paint doesn't stick to resin quite so well. And I'm going to use my favorite Duplicolor primer for that. And then we're going to get on with constructing this little jewel of an engine. I got all my cylinders and the crankcase separated from their casting blocks, ready for primer. And I've also drilled out the openings for the push rods and the cylinders, which I'm going to make from wire, or rather brass rod, I should say. Yeah, brass rod. And I've also drilled out the holes for the spark plug wires. Now, one thing I will say, anyone using this set or any Vector set, do be careful because as I discovered the hard way, what other way is there? Their resin is very, very brittle. The first thing I did when I was separating the casting block from the crankcase was snap off the oil sump. So that's something you gotta watch out for. But ready for primer. And remember, whenever you're spray painting, safety is the key word. You have to keep safe. I would say. Okay. Okay, we'll get all those bits and pieces primed and ready for paint, which I will do anon. And in the meantime, I've actually done quite a bit of work on the wings because I just kind of felt like it, so I did. Now, Hasegawa has molded part of the trailing edge on the top half of the wing. And I guess they did this so that they could get a nice sharp trailing edge, and they succeeded admirably. It's very nice. It's quite sharp. But that does mean that we're going to have an awkward seam to fill right in the middle of all our nice fabric texture. Now, when I put the two halves together, thusly, I first noticed that I did have a bit of a gap there. And also when I ran my finger over it, I could tell that there was a step. The trailing edge here was slightly higher than my wing insert. So to correct that, now I should say that I am a firm believer in correcting fit problems by the root cause of the fit problem. In other words, looking at it and going, why doesn't this actually fit? What is stopping it from fitting? And then correcting that rather than relying on a shitload of filler to do the job for you. I would much rather do it this way. So looking at it, number one, I noticed that the step was caused by the fact that this is a little bit too thin. So what I've done is I've padded that out with some strips of 5 thou card. And you'll notice that I also put some double layers of 30 thou card where my rigging wires are going to be going in, which I will get to in the rigging section. And I've done that on the bottom wing as well, there. So yeah, so that fit, yeah, it did fit. That solved the problem of the step. When I put that back together, it is now pretty much flush. I've got a nice joint there now. Now, the other reason that I had that slight gap is because of the molding limitation process. Now, when they pop this out of the mold, it has to have a slight bevel on there in order for it to come out. I just take my knife here. So it is beveled slightly this way, which means that when you drop that in, the bottom of that is not going to allow a perfect fit. You're going to have that gap. So what I've done is sanded the trailing edge of this so that I now have a bevel like that. And when I put my wing together, like this, I now have a darn near perfect fit. which means I'll have very, very little filling to do. I can take care of that with Mr. Surfacer, and I'm not going to destroy any of my fabric effect. So, me likey, good. Ah. And I'm going to have to do the same with the wingtips because there's a bit of a fit issue with those as well, but not a problem. So, that's what I've done with that one. I'm going to have to do the same on the bottom wings because they've molded that in the exact same way. Now, I've also taken a further step of putting in a spar on the bottom wings made from square brass tubing. Now, this might seem like overkill, and it probably is, but I'd rather play it safe and not find out in a couple of years that my wings are drooping. So this adds a lot of rigidity to it, and I just bent it to the correct dihedral angle and epoxied it in place, and also further secured it with bits of plastic sheet. And while I'm on the subject of epoxy, to the kind people at Gorilla Glue, I really like your epoxy. It's great stuff. But this double barrel dispenser thingy blows, and not in a fun way. Okay? Because one side of this, I think it's this darker liquid here, is slightly thicker than the other, and it's also more prone to clogging. So what happens when you plunge it, you get a big sploosh out of one side and little or none out of the other, which is very annoying and very wasteful. Now, I'm sure this seemed like a great idea when some egghead brought it up at a board meeting. I'm sure you all jumped on it and saw big dollar signs in your eyes. But for us poor schmucks that actually have to use it, it's very annoying. Don't do it. I'm sure it's part of your big nefarious plan to get me to buy more by having great gobs out of one side and none out of the other, by which means I'll empty this side and still have this side full, and I'll have to go and buy more. But I have foiled your little red wagon. Oh, yes. I cut this part in half. See, I now have 2 separate plungers. So now it works. So there, you swines. So today's video marks a little bit of a change for me, a little change in philosophy and intention anyway. I am hopefully going to be doing weekly videos, or at the very least, bi-weekly, or every other week. Is that bi-weekly? I don't know. Anyway, every 2 weeks, but hopefully once a week. So next week, I will be doing some more work on the P12E, and there might be other exciting tidbits in there as well for your amazement and amusement. But this does conclude today's exciting episode. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you do all those things that people on YouTube keep telling you to do, like subscribe, share, jump up and down, pet a dog, bark at the moon, scratch and sniff, you know, all that stuff. Do check out my membership stuff. There's some more and more videos going on there all the time for members only, and there's other perks as well. And then, of course, you've got some merchandise. Not merch, merchandise. Have we become so lazy we can't even say merchandise anymore? Apparently. I have merchandise. Other channels have merch. So check that out as well. There's some cool mugs and t-shirts and stuff. You know, you gotta have stuff, right? What's a world without stuff? Thank you again for watching, and all going well. We'll see you next week.